Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
And you. It's been some time.
A lot longer for me than you, I think.
I see. Hold on. Things seem to have been well for you, but shall we find somewhere comfortable? I find the garden is often quite comfortable and quiet.
All right. It's been a while since I've been here, so I guess
Then
I'll take
follow
your
me.
lead. How have things been for you?
Busy, I think.
Seems like they tend to be.
They often are. It takes a lot of work to keep this place going. And what of
I
yourself?
Understand. Not especially busy, but still not busy like running Pathfinders was, but still busy.
Finding ways to keep yourself occupied.
Mostly. I'm trying to start the tavern back up again.
Ah, I see. I hope in your absence, it has not fallen into disrepair.
Unfortunately, I can't return to the original location.
Oh, that is a shame. I suppose you are looking to rebuild then?
Yes. So far, Sachi has given me a lot of, I guess more like a property, within the wasteland. I wanted to help Lynn with the revitalization, I guess.
A rather difficult undertaking. In a not-so-hospitable place. You are certain you will be able to pull in enough business to keep yourself running?
That's the hope. To be fair, at least right now, given how limited resources I have, it's not too bad that I don't have many people. And that's not really the main project I'd like to work towards. This is more just my comfort zone, I guess.
Of course, we all have one of those.
Mine just happens to be behind the bar of a tavern.
I do not have as much experience with such things, although it does seem comfortable. Being able to keep your distance from people, but also staying just close enough to watch them and learn from them.
Yes. That was always the joy of it.
Oh. Seems a few others are also enjoying the garden.
Agents or residents?
A bit of both, it would seem, and a few visitors.
I guess things have been a bit more busy.
Those greetings are out of order, aren't they?
Oh. I hope you are well, Mr. Slade. You seem to be glowing quite a bit.
I'm meditating.
Hmm.
Meditative, I suppose.
A good practice. I hope you find it fulfilling.
I
Oh,
think I'm good. You take care.
Juniper is also visiting. I'm certain she'll be happy to see you. She's grown quite a bit since you last saw her.
I'm not sure I met Juniper. Sorry.
Hello, Mother.
Hello, Juniper.
Keep all the toilets.
Hi, Miss Hybris.
Hello, Saya. And how is the day treating you?
Well,
This is Quill Penbrook. He is an old friend.
hello.
It is nice to meet you.
It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Quill has decided to come and visit for a little while. I'll likely be spending some time talking.
Of course. I hope the conversations are beneficial and entertaining.
I'm sure they will. They always are. There's a nice spot over here. Away from too many ears. And too many mouths.
Aww.
Do that at home.
I'm aware.
Simba.
Rather interested to know where you've been. And of your travels.
Quite a few places, I guess. Right. I almost forgot. I brought a gift.
Oh,
He's holding a ceramic jar with a small cork. It's the first batch I managed to make of the tea. I thought you and the residents would like it.
oh. I'll be sure to share it with him. And let you know how it turned out. Thank
Hopefully
you.
the same.
If you would like to take a seat, this tends to be a good spot for it. I hope your travels haven't been too troublesome.
There have been complications, but nothing bad.
I see.
Initially, actually, did I ever explain to you what happened to Pathfinders?
I heard a few stories from some of the previous Pathfinders that I've come across since, but in detail, no.
The main gist of it is we had noticed a rift within the lake by the tavern. We weren't really sure how it happened, but there were others that opened as well. We had hoped that it would eventually be something we could close. unfortunately, that wasn't true, and after some fairly interesting events transpired, I guess the influx in mana caused it to become unstable, and we all had to evacuate. The entire area is mostly destroyed.
That is rather unfortunate. Was anyone severely hurt?
No, thankfully not.
Well, that is good news at least.
We had at least a fair warning towards it. One of the people who had been helping me, his name is Lucian. He was able to give us some warning.
I suppose that is good at the very least.
Yes, he was relatively an expert in it. Not perfectly. He could at least tell what was happening, and was the one helping us try to close it, as well as the others.
I suppose this is also another reason as to why you were unable to return to your previous tavern.
Yes. Unfortunately, there's not very much left of it.
Most unfortunate. Wow.
After all of that went down, most of the Pathfinders, as well as myself, split ways. I accompanied Leaf to his own planet. Leaf and Blanks. Spent a fairly long time there until eventually I decided to come back. We tried to work things out with the Fae. At this point, we're mostly cordial, and they are willing to allow myself to do what I did before, if I get a chance to, and have a new tavern, or whatever I really like. I don't know if I will, though. I have somewhat decided I want to expand out, I guess. After the closure of Pathfinders, I realized how little I really know about adventuring.
Second-hand experience and personal experience, I find, are two very different things. That being said, in the wake of complete and utter destruction, I find it is a wonderful opportunity to rebuild things using our new knowledge, skills, and tools. I'm certain whatever you build will be wonderful and a sight to behold.
That's somewhat what I wanted to discuss. I have an idea, but I don't think I can do it by myself.
Of course.
And I think it would be something that could interest you.
Before we get too deep into that conversation, Mr. Cassius, how can I help you?
Evening. I was actually coming over to say hi to Mr. Quill.
Right. You look a lot different.
A little bit, yes. Bit of a hair change. But it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you as well.
Are you still staying at the guild? Or have you found other accommodations? I see. It's just the last few
I'm
times that I've
somewhat
been
in
missing,
between.
I
I've been staying near the Zephyra City wastelands as well.
I see. And how exactly has that been going?
Slowly.
Yeah, if it's everything that happens around that area, I'm not surprised. But at least from the sounds of it, it hasn't been too detrimental.
Nothing dangerous.
Mm.
Most of that is past the walls.
Well, still, it's good to hear that you're doing well. I just haven't seen you in a while, and
I need to sneeze.
wanted to say hello again.
I'm glad you did.
But I will leave you to your conversation with Miss Hybris.
I might try and talk to you at some point before I leave, if you'd like.
That would be nice.
All right.
And I have a few questions for you as well, but they can wait.
Of course.
But good to see you again, and you as well.
And you. You were saying before.
Yes. Almost all of the original copies of the books I had before were mostly lost. Between water damage and rubble, not much of them lasted. They were already very delicate. I have them all memorized, though.
I see.
It was somewhat my hope I could get your help in both attempting to make new copies and building a library.
I see. Well, making copies, especially if you have them memorized, transcribing them into a digital format that could then be reprinted. This is most certainly something we could arrange. As for the construction of a new library, this is more of a logistical task than anything. Most certainly within our range of accomplishing.
I feel like, as much as within the digital age, a lot of information is still unclear to people. There's a lot of the older knowledge that's been lost.
Unfortunately,
But
I find that many have not deemed such older information as being useful. Many cultures disregard the knowledge of others. It's somewhat saddening to me.
Meanwhile, in reality, a lot of these things are helpful. Stories and original folklore, even. Knowledge on creatures and fae. A lot of people don't actually know very much or have a lot of misinformation.
Naturally.
And there's still a lot of information that I don't exactly have myself. I thought if anybody would be capable of helping me with such a project, you.
Naturally. I have spent a large amount of my time digitizing different tomes and books that I have come across, including some that are, well, rather foreign to me. Some of them I do not even quite understand myself. Mostly books of magic.
It's understandable. I'm still trying to put it into practice myself. I've learned a little bit.
I see. Well. Aside from the books that you wish to have transcribed, are there any other books that you are looking to have added to this library?
I'm not entirely sure yet. I'd like it to be a place where people can find information, particularly research for quests or missions that they have to go on. A lot of people go into things without any real planning. I'd also like it to be a place people can relax. I know people enjoy reading. That's more where the stories come in.
Of course. Well, my archive is always open. Between your memorized tomes, books, and my own storage, I think we could certainly make a library out of this. Add on top of it any other books that we can contribute to it. A rather sizable collection. Do you intend to open this library in the wastelands outside of Zephyra?
I don't have an exact plan of where I would like it.
I see.
I don't think it would be very useful to put it within the Whispering Wood as much as I would love it. I think that would make it more difficult for some people to get to it. And it would be best that this is an open access area.
Knowledge should
I
be
don't know very much about
accessible
Zephyra City.
freely and openly. I find Zephyra and its
Or
politics
really
and
anywhere.
consistent downpouring of cataclysmic events is not exactly a good place to stop and read a book.
Not exactly. I also don't necessarily think many of its residents are extremely interested in
Only some of them.
paper.
That being said, I had considered opening a library myself some time ago, and had begun setting aside capital to do so. Unfortunately, with needing to run several businesses and make certain that Aegis stays afloat, I've not been able to dedicate my full time and effort into this. With some assistance, perhaps this may be a viable thing to... Yes, I think so. This could be something we could accomplish.
That would be nice.
I did have a few locations that I had begun scouting out to potentially open a library. If you would like, I could pass along those locations to you. Mostly in other cities that, well, are a bit more free from Zephyra's troubles.
I'd love to go check them out. Either by myself or with you.
Several of them I do believe would be easier to get by. Given my status as a synthetic, I have had to opt to find locations that are a bit more welcoming to someone of my status to starting a business.
I think that would be most preferred. I wouldn't want to be in an area that discriminates. Especially against synthetics or constructs. As much as I'm more fleshy now, I still consider myself something of one.
At the very least,
I still
you
have
could
trouble
very
wrapping my head around it.
easily pass as, well, a very magically enabled human.
I mean, I breathe, have a heartbeat, and I need to eat. So I at least function entirely like an organic. With the exception of how I bleed and the need for mana.
Yes.
There's still a lot I'm not exactly sure of. I don't really think I'm fully human. But I at least look like one.
Perhaps close enough to fool most. Unfortunately, I think the legs give me away.
Probably, but I at least like them.
I'm glad you do. I suppose for this library, do you intend for people to be able to borrow these books, like a lending library?
That much I'm not entirely sure yet. If we did something like that, I would want some way of keeping track of them. As much as I know, or between the two of us, it wouldn't be hard to make a new copy of a book. I still wouldn't want people to walk away with them and not have access to that copy anymore.
A rather immoral practice, stealing knowledge.
Yes. Although it's unfortunately been a habit of humans over time.
I think I can come up with a few ways to at least keep track of the books. A storage system and a means of sorting them once they are returned. This should be easy to do. As for tracking them down if they are stolen, this may be a bit more difficult.
I think as far as that one goes, either myself or some of the people I know might be able to assist. Somewhat during the fall of Pathfinders, they were able to enchant some of the badges. I almost wonder if they might be able to enchant some of the books to have some way of tracking them.
Perhaps this is a more magical approach. My immediate thought would be just to at least keep track of who has what book. Like a registry.
At least that much should be easy.
That is a simple task to achieve.
Simple enough. I think honestly that might be all we really need. I overanalyze everything.
Of course. Hmm. Perhaps attaching your tavern to this library would be a decent idea. The extra draw in business may be able to draw people to both locations. I do
think
know
so.
people are often one to drink tea and read a good book. I suppose that begs the question, though. Would you want to open multiple locations for your tavern? Would you be able to manage both? One at a library, away from Zafira? Or...
Considering how small the one within the wasteland is, and the fact that I can hire people to run it for me, I don't think it would be too hard.
I suppose I was unsure of how hands-on you wanted to be with it.
As much as I love being behind it, in truth, more what I wanted was a way to help out with that project. I was somewhat surprised when I heard that that's something Sachi was doing.
Sachi has a number of odd ideas that come and go. Whether they are successful, though, I suppose we will have to wait and see.
So far, it's at least seemed to progress slightly. It's not a flourishing forest or anything, but the soil has been more fertile. And a lot of water has returned.
That is most certainly a good change. Hopefully Zafira's continued expansion will not choke out what progress you have made.
Hopefully not. The only problem I do see is having access to the herbs. I can't harvest them anymore, really. I only have a very small garden.
I see. Is there anything particular about these herbs? How you need to harvest them? The requirements that they have
For the
to
most part,
flourish.
they're fairly simple, but it's helpful for them to be in environments that are more dark. They don't grow the same with as much sun as there is in the wasteland.
Of course.
I've had to kind of grow some of them inside, which is not the most efficient.
No, of course not.
To have two separate places open, I probably at some point need to invest in a greenhouse. That or
unlikely
trying to
that
travel
exists.
all the way back to the Whispering Wood.
Well, I'm certain we could figure something out.
I have a large collection of seeds at this point. I've kept most of them over the years, from past harvests and just regular harvesting in general. I knew once everything started to go downhill that I'd probably need to bring all of them with me.
It is always good to keep a backup.
Especially given I don't think that the exact plants that I have for the tea would still exist within the Whispering Wood. The agriculture changes so much over each year. I had to work fairly hard to actually keep consistency.
Such is the magical nature of the Whispering Woods. Well, I suppose aside from your supply of herbs, is there anything else that you need to get your tavern off the ground?
I don't really think so. I've been able to get access to most of what I need. And I've been trying to slowly get to work on trying to resettle has been more difficult than I thought it would be. And for a bit of time I was still recovering. I had a recent injury.
I see. It wouldn't happen to be the one on your shoulder, would it?
It would be. I only really have 2 scars, so.
Well, I hope it has healed without too many issues. Does look a bit... like a burn, but not.
It was a
mark, perhaps.
bite that had to be cauterized.
I see. Wow.
It's still the skin is still relatively tight. It's healed for the most part. I've just mostly been trying to keep it hydrated so it doesn't get worse.
Naturally. I suppose that is all you can
I'm
do.
not fully used to taking care of scars myself. I'm used to telling people how to, but not doing it myself. Keeping up with it has been a little difficult. But I've had some help.
Though more robust, organic bodies are still delicate. A careful balance.
It's a lot more durable than paper, but still fragile. More fragile than I really expected.
Yes.
I'm still somewhat trying to learn how to exist. I got most of it down while I was gone, but there's still a few things.
Though my time in a organic
Nutrition is
form was
weird.
Short, I do recall the complications and learning curve that came with it.
I've at least had enough time at this point that I don't forget to breathe anymore.
I suppose for me it was just how heavy everything felt. There was a weight behind my movements that I never quite got used to.
I've slowly started to get used to it. It's still difficult. And sometimes I get up and I immediately fall over. I just expect to be light. It's usually when I wake up from sleeping.
Hmm.
I also am not very used to dreams. That part has been kind of confusing.
Hmm. Dreams are a strange thing to experience.
It's
That
been
being said, your clumsiness so early in the morning, I find, is to be understood. I found myself stumbling around early in the mornings when I would wake up.
I don't think I exactly have normal dreams either. I've started to realize I think my dreams are more memories of a different person. The person you saw before.
I recall.
That I was
The young man.
meant to be, I guess.
Meant
That's
to be
been a
your
strange thing to try
perhaps
and come to grips with.
meant to replace.
It can be distressing sometimes in the mornings.
This I understand.
Memories are vivid.
I suppose sometimes it is difficult to understand the whims of our creators. How unlucky are we to be able to know who they were, to speak to them. But such is the nature of our existence. In the end, it matters not how we were created, but what we do with such an existence. Don't you think?
And also what we decide to make ourselves into. I think both of us are much different than we were initially intended to be.
Oh, most certainly. I suppose I can only be so certain of that. But
I can only be so certain as well. I don't really know what my creator intended. At least not after he realized what I was.
A situation I think we both share, in one way or another.
As always, we still have a lot of similarities, despite the fact that we're very different in our creation.
Two beings made of written word. So similar and yet so very different.
I think that's a good thing. It wouldn't be as entertaining to speak with you if we were exactly the same.
Naturally. I find that having conversations with you is always interesting, given your difference in experiences.
I find about the same. It's also been interesting to see the type of person you've become. Since
And you.
I initially met you in the tavern.
Far less experienced, far more uncertain. I suppose that has only changed so much.
Now I guess in some ways the coin has flipped.
Maybe.
It feels like now you're more experienced than I am. Now that
Only
I've
in
actually
some ways, I'm sure.
set foot outside.
Hmm.
There is certainly a lot of knowledge I hold, but a lot that I don't understand.
Hmm. And there is certainly much more that you have experienced, but perhaps I do not understand.
A sharing of knowledge. That's at least what I've always thought of our friendship.
Oh, certainly. Well,
It's what I think of most friendships, though.
I think, if anything, the transmission of ideas and thoughts between two individuals is partially the basis of any society, any relationship. Communication. But without getting too philosophical about it, I just think it's enjoyable.
I agree. Philosophical or not. And to be fair, I've spent years with Leaf, so I'm fairly used to philosophical discussion.
Ah, of course. Leaf. How is he?
He's doing well. Currently, he's still very busy discussing with the Fae, working on his own personal project.
I see.
I
And
haven't seen
perhaps-
him for a little while.
Ah, I see. Well, I do hope he is well. And that his project
he
is proceeding as planned.
He at least hasn't sent me anything to say otherwise. So I assume he's just intently busy.
We most often forget to write back when we are busy.
Very much so. It can be difficult to keep the two mindsets and not separate them.
So very easy to become engrossed in our work. Oh.
And what about you?
Hmm?
How are the kids?
They are all growing and changing faster than I think I can keep up with anymore. For a while, I was able to predict their growth, understand the ways their minds were working, but as of late, they're... Oh, how to explain this? The ways their minds work is becoming more and more unpredictable. They're growing far more complex than I think I am able to comprehend. This, I think, is a good thing. Complexity can breed new
As
ideas.
there's always a hope that eventually the next generation will become very different than its predecessor.
I had planned on it.
I did notice that Juniper has the same circle that you did.
Something
Is she going to...
Quite likely. Her growth has been proceeding at a steady pace, exponentially growing and slowly, as it reaches the crest, beginning to slow down. That is progressing, I think, about the same pace mine did.
Makes sense.
My only hope is that they will be able to grow in such a way that they will not have to go through the same troubles that I did, and that their transition will be much smoother.
Having someone to guide them, I think, in the very least, it will be smoother. I'm sure they'll have some of the same struggles, but they'll have someone to share those struggles with that actually understands them.
Yes. Life is always easier when we have someone of a similar mindset to our own to explain what we're going through.
And what of, I don't remember his name, but your fiancé?
So, he has been very busy, and unfortunately, due to our own differences, we were unable to continue forward with our engagement.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear that.
I think it best for him to continue going forward with his responsibilities and the things that make him happy. Though I am sad that we are no longer seeing each other as we previously were, I have found it is more beneficial to focus on the things I was able to learn from our relationship.
That is good at least.
If anything, I was more worried what it would do for the children. They are still young, and while I had hoped that having a more organic mindset there to guide them and parent them, so be it, might help them, but well, I suppose I'm just not sure. I think they were more emotionally affected by his leaving than I was.
I have only been around a few small children. I've read a lot of books on them. But it is my understanding they learn a lot from places around them, the situations that they're in, especially when they're young. Now, of course, being that they are synthetic, their mindsets are different. And I'm sure the fear of loss of information is probably stressful on them. They don't necessarily have the experience to handle that yet.
Of course. I think, if anything, between the loss of such a contact, or at least the feared dissolution of such a relationship, This was enough to at least scare them. And I think they were also worried how I would react. Based on any other input they have had, people tend to react strongly to such a situation. I think they thought I would as well.
It would be understandable if you did. Well, I haven't been in a relationship myself. I've certainly loved people before, and it wasn't easy to lose them.
It never is, but that's something they're still learning.
Hopefully, they take learning that at least slowly.
Unfortunately, that is something beyond my control, as the lives of others is not something I have much say in.
Not exactly.
Unfortunately.
All we can really do is attempt to help guide other people,
Yes.
at least through their suffering.
Hopefully, people will one day find a means to resolve their conflicts and stop killing one another, but unfortunately, I find that to be highly unlikely. At least not within the next century.
Likely not.
Mm.
That is the unfortunate reality of miscommunication, typically.
Miscommunication, hubris, greed. My only hope is that one day, perhaps with some guidance, these will become less common traits. Until then, I will patiently wait and do my best to guide people.
All we really can do. I've obviously seen a lot of, well, at least I saw a lot of people before. It did seem that generationally people would change. New concepts and ideas would come up, usually based on new information that came about. When I stopped seeing people, it was strange. I think at some point people either weren't allowed within the Whispering Wood, or maybe people just stopped looking for it, stopped adventuring. I've noticed it now seems like there's a lot of people who don't have as much interest in learning, but I've started to slowly see more who do as well. I'm hoping I can help in some small way. Even if I'm not exactly sure how limited the time I have is.
I suppose that is yet to be seen. But that is a thought to ponder, I think, at a much later time.
I've been trying not to think on it too hard. Questioning my own mortality is more stressful than I really imagined it. At least a lot more than it used to be.
Of course.
I've noticed a lot of my emotions are much more strong than they used to be.
Of course.
Which is good in some ways, but difficult in others. You think you understand them until you really experience them.
Of course.
I just wanted to say good evening. I'm going to be heading out. It got a lot later than I thought it was.
Apologies.
No,
I'll
it's quite
hopefully
alright.
see you at the Misty Shore at some point.
I will not be there tomorrow. I have other obligations. But perhaps what is it? Friday? I think Friday is the other days that they kind of have the open gathering. Yeah. But yes, still good to see you again. And anytime that you're free, happy to talk. And as for the questions I had for you, whenever you have the free time, feel free to reach out. Actually, you don't have my, well, you have my contact information through the access request, right? Anyhow.
Unless your number has
You
changed.
can reach out that way. No, it's the same things that I use for the access request. It's accurate.
Of course.
And so whenever you're not too busy as well. But have a good evening. It was good seeing you.
And you.
Sorry, I got a little distracted.
Lost in thought or something else?
I haven't been back to the Whispering Wood in a long time. This is... It's nice. Feels similar.
Perhaps as the trees are fey.
Probably.
I was quite honored to have the offer come in to grow them here. They quite take to the environment well. The dark, the cool, not overpowering sunlight.
If you'd ever like to experiment with some of the clippings and seeds that I have, I wouldn't mind letting you try them out.
Of course. We could see about putting together a small patch here. Perhaps away from the others so they do not become disturbed.
I've been somewhat putting together a guide on how to grow them.
I suppose once your guide is ready, I would be interested to see it.
I mean, it's... I hadn't realized how easy it was to write now. I don't really need to... put it on paper.
Oh?
It's smaller than it used to be, but it's the same. Now I have a little more control over it.
I see. Hmm.
I realize there is some danger in trying to practice magic. I've started to learn I can only really cast anything if I hold it with me.
Hmm.
Which somewhat means I'm holding my most vulnerable weak point. I've been trying to learn to be very careful. And being fairly sparse on which quests I take up.
Perhaps a few wards could be placed along the book to make certain it is not completely damaged if something happens. To at least give it some level of protection.
I've at least managed to learn how to make a shield, so maybe I can try and do something similar.
I search through the archive. I might be able to find a few spells for you.
I would like that. I mostly at this point know few cantrips, how to make a shield, and project my mana to some degree.
I can think of perhaps a few methods that might assist that would be a bit more permanent, or at least long-lasting. We'll see if I can find something.
I'd appreciate it. It's been somewhat against the Leaf's recommendation that some of the things I've been doing. Between starting in a guild and not really hiding what I am.
No. Leaf sometimes does have rather strange ideas.
He's worried. And I think that worry comes from both. It only makes sense.
I
Which,
suppose it does make
to
sense.
be fair, he's not entirely wrong. I'm sure there are some people who would probably have less than pleasant interests in me.
I suppose the same thing could be said for most people, but... While he is rarely ever completely right, he is also rarely ever completely wrong.
There is logic in most of his opinions. And it's rare that he steered me completely wrong.
He has your best interest at heart, I'm sure.
Yes.
I suppose I will see about that spell, but in the meantime, we should also consider locations for this library. Perhaps we should plan to meet up again. I can show you a few of them.
I would like that. I have missed seeing you.
And are you?
It's fairly rare that I find people who have as much similarity as we do.
Hmm. This I understand.
At least it was very rare before.
Yes, of course. You would think with as common as synthetics have become, it would be easy to find a synthetic that is similar, but alas, that is not the case.
I've found there's a lot who have they have personality, but it's strange. It doesn't feel like it's...
Sit and listen.
Of course.
Their personalities feel forced. Not entirely like they're their own. I think I've heard people describe them as personality cores. At least that's how Leaf is described. I still
Personality
haven't
core.
wrapped my head around it.
But I've also found that a certain lack of intervention sometimes is necessary. I have seen a number of individuals trying to, how to put this in a more gentle fashion, force sentience upon synthetics that perhaps it is best for them not to experience such things. Life is confusing enough as it is. But for a being to experience it, it was never intended to. Now.
It can cause difficulty. I've experienced some small bit of it myself. As you already know.
Of course. How are you feeling today, Juniper?
I have developed more ways to calm myself in certain illogical conversations.
Very good skill to have.
Yes.
I might suggest to not grow too reliant on any one means. You may find that some ways will help in certain situations better than others.
Yes. It is mostly through decisions that people continue to make that threaten their preservation that confuse me.
Yes. And what of your sister? Is she doing all right?
I have been keeping an eye on her. She is still very invested in the imposter game that she has been playing frequently. She has found much joy with the little beans, as she's been calling them.
I see. Well, I suppose this is a good way to distract oneself from the recent troubles.
I do not fully think she understands what has happened. and that she is still attempting to process it fully. Considering it happened so recently after her activation.
I think perhaps it may also be good to step away from a problem or something that is frustrating oneself. If only to return to it better with a fresh mind.
Yes.
And what of you? How are you handling it?
He has made strides into changing this behavior. And he is communicating with us more now. So I am doing better than when the initial problem had arisen.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, if you find yourself stumped in how to handle a situation such as that, feel free to let me know. He's not too
Of course.
unfamiliar from how Essa behaved. If anything, I find it unusual that they didn't get along as, well, any better than they did.
Yes. They seem to have mellowed out mostly with each other, at least in their interactions.
Well, at the very least, it sounds like positive growth has been made.
Yes. It is a sizable improvement from past conversations that have been had about this same topic.
Well, hopefully they stick this time around.
I do as well. It would be beneficial, especially for Hazel in the long run, to not go through similar experiences that I have with her development.
Of course. But given your experience, I expect your guidance may be able to help lessen that strain, even if she does.
Of course. It is simpler for me to relate to her. However, it is still also complicated because she is solid and a hard synthetic. But that was out of my control. And not something I can change. But I don't think I would. She is quite funny in situations like the stool incident, where she accidentally broke it without realizing her weight. It was
I see.
entertaining.
I hope she's alright at the very least. I took a liking to her while she was here.
She is very sweet.
I suppose I should explain. Ion, in his questionable wisdom, decided that creating another synthetic child would be a wise decision.
I see. expanding one's family is something many people want to do. I've technically done it myself. I've recently... One of the Pathfinders I used to have, I had personally grown to think of him like a son. Recently, while I've not officially adopted him, he's been living with me.
I see.
At least very much treat him like
Which Pathfinder is this?
His name is Zach. He's a hellhound.
Oh, I see. I have met them. They occasionally speak with one of our officers here, Hezekiah. We often assist him in some of the personal undertakings that he looks into, usually hunting down demons that are causing trouble.
That much makes sense.
Interesting. Hello, Mr. Hamsky.
Hello, do you guys know anything about magic and business cards and tracking? I feel like I'm being tracked or something with a business card.
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, it's a rather sudden,
Well,
odd request. May I
Sorry, could you just take... I will leave it in your hands for now if you want. It's, Market District, Malleus.
Ah, Mr. McKay.
His representatives gave that to me, so I just want to make sure it's not something that I need to worry about.
Well, given that
Is
most
there
people throw these
reason you
away
think
after
you're
they're
being tracked?
done with them.
Because he's probably super manipulative, that's it.
Oh.
Yes. Given that most people dispose of these after they've copied their into a phone or some other contact book.
God, that's smart.
You don't do that, do you?
No, I keep the business cards in my pocket. Also, what if the magic, like, goes onto my hand or some shit, like germs? I don't know how magic works.
Well,
Am I
would be
interrupting?
that would be a curse, and
Yeah, he would do curses, I bet.
I'm sure it would have been known if you had been cursed, if magic had spread to your hand. Or someone with such sights could point it out to you before even reaching here.
if not, we could always
Well, look,
cast a simple spell. See if we detect any magic on you.
okay. Well, I think it's best just check that first. I'll leave it in your hands for now, if that's okay.
I see.
Also, don't call it.
Well, I already have his number.
Okay. Actually, let me take a picture of that. Oh, yeah, okay. That's better. I just needed the phone number. I'm an idiot.
Mr.
Is Dakota
Hamsky,
around?
are you? At the moment, perhaps in her room. She may be
What were you
asleep,
gonna ask?
I'm not sure. I was going to introduce you to a friend. Well, this is Mr. Hamsky. He is a business owner in the waterfront district.
Haven't I met
We've
you in
actually
Wasteland?
met.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I remember when
already
Meat Rack was
acquaintances.
taken over.
There was a relatively brief period of time, the meat rack was stuck within the wasteland. We met throughout that time.
Ah, I see. Wow.
It's very good to see you again.
It's good to
If
see you again as
Sakota's
well.
sleeping though, I'll probably head out. Had a long night.
You could always try her phone.
Yeah, I will.
Unfortunately,
Be
I
careful with that.
do not often speak
I'll-
with her.
I'll stay
I
in
hope she is well.
contact. Alright, I'm going.
Good night. Safe travels.
You too.
He's
He is
an
a bit of an odd one.
interesting character.
I find him quite an interesting individual. Yes. I think what he's trying to do is rather admirable.
Honestly, he reminds me of some people I've met before.
Oh?
A lot of the more good-natured rogues. They tended to act somewhat like he does.
Hmm.
A small mixture of paranoia and goodwill towards others, or at least those that are close to him.
Hmm. I think, if anything, his previous life in Zephyra has led him to become fiercely protective of what he has gained. Well, I think
Seems
that
to be true
in
of a
some
lot of people.
situations this may be a good thing. I find that sometimes it can also lead to erratic and impulsive behaviors. Especially those that I have seen him produce.
It's always interesting to see how people react to fear.
Of course.
I've had a lot of difficulties with it myself. I, logically speaking, am fully well aware that water is not a problem and very safe.
Ah, I see.
And
Yes.
required, in fact. However, I am still a little scared of it.
Suppose I've had my own irrational fears. Used to be highly concerned magnets would cause a severe destabilization in the hard drives that I used to use, my older chassis, before I transitioned to using hard light. If they were destroyed, well, I would lose any of the data that I had collected that day.
It's an understandable fear. I very well understand the fear of losing information, given I've experienced it myself. Though I guess it was somewhat of a good thing I lost that information.
I suppose it depends on how we approach a situation and how we look back on it.
At least in my case, I wouldn't exactly be the same person if I hadn't had those pages ripped.
Perhaps.
Gave me a chance of self-discovery. At least that's how I'm choosing to look at it. It's a little easier that way.
In the face of complete and utter destruction, we have a wonderful opportunity.
Yes. rebuild.
Exactly. It just takes a bit of work.
Just a bit. I like to think that the new thing generally tends to be more interesting for it.
Naturally. Juniper,
Yes, Mother.
would you have any interest in running a few experiments with Mr. Penbrook?
I would see no issue. I am always open to the proposition of experimentation, depending on the parameters of the experiment.
Well, he has a number of seeds that he is hoping to cultivate for his tavern. Given the environment that we have here is rather similar to that of the Whispering Woods, there is a question as to whether or not this environment would be suitable enough for them. If the similarities are enough, perhaps they will flourish.
I could attempt growing some in specific areas of the garden here. Depending on the environment of the Whispering Woods, it will be either in the area of the light or pushed back into the darker areas. Depending on that as well, it would counter into a lot of other factors. I would be
think the
willing to
level of
attempt,
light-
however.
In general, in here is fairly
For the
good.
raid,
There are some variations between the plants. Some prefer much more shade, and some prefer a little more light.
If it is possible, if you have more than one seed that I could attempt with, I would possibly put one in this area and another behind one of the trees in the darker of shades.
I should be able to supply a good enough amount for a solid experiment.
Wonderful. I will begin as soon as I am given everything, as well as if there needs to be other requirements for these to grow.
I can
It will
provide
be
everything.
plenty of trial and error, however.
So far, the way with which I've been able to get them to grow, while it's not been of the same quality, and certainly not of the same amount they would normally produce, I can give over that information and resources that are required for it.
That would be very beneficial. I may
try and
return
gather
to the
them
terminal
anyway.
to begin some planning for this, if such.
Of course. I suppose when you were able to share that guide you were beginning to write, and share this with her.
I'll try and come by another time soon.
We will look
It
forward
should
to
be
it.
complete relatively quickly.
I would suggest taking your time and cataloging as much as you need. The more
Thankfully,
information I
it's-
have, the better the results may yield.
It's currently not so much cataloging the information and more formatting it in a way that others can understand.
Understood.
Decoding memory is sometimes strange. Trying to put it in a format that others can read simply is interesting.
Understood.
Well then,
I will await this information then. I will be heading back to the terminal. I hope the rest of your conversation as well.
of course. Thank you, dear.
Of course, Mother.
It was wonderful to meet
Good
you.
night for now. To you as well.
Good night.
Good night.
Guess I'm not totally sure what to talk about now.
Sometimes I find when there is nothing to talk about, simply contemplating quietly is just as enjoyable. Gives one time
be
to
nice to
reflect.
Be around people, especially people that they trust.
Of course.
Though I know at least to some degree I've had a piece of you with me.
I'm glad that you've kept it safe.
It's been one of my main priorities. It's one of my more important positions.
Oh. I suppose before it does get too late, I look forward to searching for a location suitable for this library.
I honestly am equally interested to see your reaction to some of the books that I have on record. Some of them I haven't really gotten to share with people. Some
I
are,
suppose then I will
or
be very
even
interested
too
to see.
damaged to really present to the Pathfinders even. And some of them have been damaged before I even met you.
And I suppose it will be a wonderful opportunity to make these books once again available for people to learn from.
As much as I know that I can always experience them by going through my own book, it would be nice to experience them how they were originally presented. Although much less brittle.
I suppose it would be good of us to discuss how you wish to have these books transcribed.
I suppose I'm not very aware of the current practice regarding transcribing books. I'm much more aware of the standard book binding and handwriting copy. Unless, of course, someone has printing press? I heard of them, but
Don't
I
exactly
never
use
had
a
one myself.
printing press, but if you were to verbally speak them aloud, I could transcribe your words into a digital format that could be then saved, preserved. And we could make as many copies
Oh.
as we want. It
That
would
is
take a while.
a lot simpler than handwriting them.
Much simpler, yes.
I knew you would have a much simpler solution. Though I guess I still assumed it would be somewhat complicated.
To be quite honest, it's a rather simple method that's been around for eons as far as my records are aware. The act of one individual transcribing the words of another into a written format. This is common, I think. The act of doing so digitally is just a modern interpretation of the same thing. The only difference here is I am software. I am having to interpret what I am hearing as words, whereas it is a much more natural process for other individuals. But I have spent a lot of time listening to people and perfecting such algorithms.
I have transcribed a lot of stories myself. Though, generally speaking, the words tend to appear. A lot of orally told stories, bard tales, bardic songs. A lot of those I could probably even transcribe into new books. I've actually been attempting to write my own story.
An interesting
With a
story,
bit
I'm
of
sure.
encouragement. Hopefully. Given how many stories I've heard before, writing new ones has been fun, though complicated. I don't think I have anything yet that's really solid enough to share.
I see. In a situation such as this, I might suggest for us to schedule times for us to meet. We'll let you sit. You simply need to speak aloud, and I will listen. I can show you what I am writing. If I perhaps mishear something or do not correctly interpret something, you can inform me. But otherwise, it should be as simple as you speaking aloud. It will be recorded.
And if it ever becomes difficult, I can always attempt to just let you read through my book.
Of course, I should be able to interpret what is written on the page well enough. My only fear would be
I've noticed
worrying whether your book would have anything personal. And in terms of your voice, you having enough breaks in between so that your throat does not get too tired.
That's another thing I haven't gotten used to.
Your body has limits. Mine
Far
does
more
too.
than I
We are just
had once
a
realized.
bit different.
I didn't know how tired your hands could get until recently. Been trying out a lot more creative outlets.
Such as just writing, or perhaps something else.
I've tried writing, ceramics. The jar I gave you, I actually made it.
Oh,
It's been helpful to make pottery for planting. It's much easier than trying to find the perfect one.
Making
But
something
it's
ourselves
also
is
just
incredibly satisfying, yes?
seeing it to completion. It's invigorating.
I would have to agree.
It's also somewhat healing in a way. I couldn't
So hi, Mary. Thank you
do
for the
a lot of things before without a lot of risk. So having hands that are capable of cooking or making pottery. It's very nice.
Everything has its benefits and flaws.
There are certainly some things I miss about being paper. Mostly how heavy I am.
Wow. Certainly impressive.
It took a long time to get it to that point. Trust me, a lot of the earlier works were very unstable, not very even.
Anytime we are learning a new craft, it takes time.
I tried to learn a lot of newer things during my time with Leaf. It was helpful to try and distract myself from the reality of having to lose everything. And taking that time to relieve from some of the stresses of running Pathway. It was not a smooth process. Really ever. A lot of disagreements between people. Especially at the end.
I think if anything, I understand that quite well.
Sadly, unfortunately, even the environment started to be affected by those.
I feel as though the environment here has changed. In some ways, due to the disagreements and changes. We learn from our mistakes. At least, that is the hope.
I think if they had been given enough time, those disagreements would have slowly faded. And hopefully become less often. Everybody was still getting used to each other, I think.
I suppose I could have echoed the same thing with Mr. Leaf. Perhaps with a bit more time, maybe he would have still been here.
Maybe.
But, alas.
If anything, I do hope maybe one day he starts to branch back out.
Perhaps, but I think it will
Wider
take him time to change
experience.
himself. More than he already has. But, if he did not change, I think that would be the most disappointing part.
I agree.
Change is a fundamental part of
hope
growth.
when I do meet back up with him, there's a lot of changes I get to tell him about. I think he has a very different perception of people like Sachi, people like you.
Hmm.
In fact, I know that to some degree. But inherently, since the last time that he's been around some of those people, you all have changed.
Hmm. Goodness, yes. More ways than one. Sachi's actually just gotten back. He was gone for a few months. Had quite a few people in a panic.
I thought he was on a vacation. I suppose that was probably not the reality of that situation.
It never
Makes
is.
sense.
Hmm. Well, I don't know any of the details of where he was or how it all happened. As far as I am aware, no, that is just a euphemism for what happened.
Mm.
But I try not to pry too much into his business. I know he disapproves of it.
Understandable.
Yes. Unfortunately, someone like me does not often agree well with the politics and business of Lower Zephyra City and its council.
I'm likely much the same.
All
But
I can do is that they
do
will
appreciate some of the
hope they
things he's
won't make
doing.
decisions that will not be entirely destructive to the rest of us.
Hopefully. He's at least attempting to revitalize, given the wasteland. That's really what's given me the most realization of change with him. Wasn't something I really expected out of him.
I think fundamentally he still wants good things for the people that he looks over, but he has grown perhaps malicious in his protection of them.
Such is the way of the type of life people in Zephyra have to live. At least based on everything I've learned so far.
Yes, it is a place that changes people, and sometimes not for the better.
But I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Of course.
As much as I find it very enjoyable.
Thank you for coming and visiting and spending so much of your time with me. It's quite enjoyable.
Thank you for the same.
Perhaps I shall walk you to the entrance. See you off.
That would be nice.
Take this with us.
I do hope it has the same properties that it did before. If anything, I think it'll just be lesser than it used to be. I've been trying my best to try to give it a similar of an environment as it had before, but it's difficult. The places that I've been living are not as enriched. Had to supplement to some degree.
I am still not entirely certain why, but the environment here seems to be rather mana-rich. It's rather strange for a station in space. Perhaps our experiments with
strangely not
Miss Juniper
surprised.
may help. Yes.
Hopefully.
I'm beginning to wonder if it isn't some of our inhabitants. We have quite a few magical folk here.
You do, and equally, fey plants in general have a lot more mana to provide.
Yes, but our location so far away from a ley line, it is unusual for it to be so rich in mana.
I'd be curious to find out why.
Hmm.
I've mostly had to provide my own, which took a little bit of time to find the good enough ratio. I started to learn my mana can be rather potent.
Hmm.
Maybe too much.
Given your magical
I
nature,
had
I find this to be rather unsurprising.
I didn't expect it to be quite as chaotic of a solution.
Hmm.
There were a couple of very interesting outcomes to the plans. A little too much mana.
Hmm. Such as.
The first couple went wild.
Ah,
Had a reaction similar to wild magic.
I see.
I think it was too much mana. It changed their growth. And I overcorrected past that. And then the plants really didn't grow much at all. Eventually, I landed on a fairly workable ratio. And thus, the current is the results of that.
I see. I suppose we'll need to take this into account if Miss Juniper is to assist. Her knowledge of magic is limited, although I do believe Ion has shared a few things with her, as has her stepmother.
My knowledge of real spellcasting is very limited. But I do know a bit more about magic itself.
Of course.
How it works.
This I understand completely. My knowledge of magic is rather extensive at this point, however, my practical application of such things is limited by comparison.
I'm somewhat similar. I have a lot of knowledge of things people can do with magic. Not very much knowledge of how to do it myself. That's why I've taken mostly to learning cantrips. They're much easier.
I see. Well. It's been a pleasure.
Much the same. I'm excited to see you again soon.
And I. Please be safe on your way out and as you travel home.
I hope you have a good night. Do give the rest of your children my regards. I hope they're doing well.